to give credit for this idea to a caller to my Hair Nation show last night who listens to this show and the Monday Hair Nation show. And I apologize that I didn't write down the person's name or city. Obviously, I get a ton of calls and I can't remember the person's name. But somebody last night on the second show called in with this idea. They said to me, it would be cool if you did, when you have time in your daily show, where you do something where it's like undiscovered gems, like records that you love that nobody else knows, that weren't successful records. And it's kind of, and he even admitted this, it's kind of a little bit of a variation on bands that should have been huge. But instead of talking about the bands, and you can make the case that any band, well, here's the thing. Most of the bands were not huge at all. Thus, these records were not huge. However, a very important difference here. You can absolutely have a scenario where the record is completely unknown, but the band is very well known. If a band has a big catalog, they could easily have a record or two in there that were complete stiffs that nobody knows, nobody bought, nobody pays attention to, that you love. Or they could just be bands that never made it but put out these great records that you love, you listen to every day, but nobody knows about, and they're completely off the radar to most people. So I decided to label it as Undiscovered Gems. And we're not doing it as a countdown or a list or anything like that. But today, I want to hear from you about those records that you feel strongly about, records that are go-tos for you, but are just, they're just unknown records. Like you talk to your friends, they have no idea. Nobody talks about these bands. Nobody plays these bands. Nobody knows what these records are. Now, the guy, when he called in and gave me this idea yesterday, the band he called in to use as his example is a band called Cry of Love, which I've mentioned before in the past and was a phenomenal band. Audley Freed is the guitar player who at times played with the Black Crowes and Chris Robinson. Somebody told me I think he's Sheryl Crow's guitar player now. But the Cry of Love album, Brother, their debut album, is an unbelievable record. And I agreed with the guy completely about that. And it's one of those records that should have been huge in a band that should have been huge. Very bluesy, hard rock sort of thing. And it's a record I listen to constantly, but again, nobody knows it. And when I say nobody, I understand that, of course, there are some people that will know these records and some people that bought these records, but these records were not successful. They're records you have not heard on the radio and never will in any sort of real way. And in many cases, bands that went nowhere as well. So, to open, I'm going to run down a few of mine that came into my head hours ago. And I sent them to Joel in advance, and he has pulled some clips of all these songs. Again, not the full songs, but just giving you a little taste of these bands. And I'll give you a few minutes on each or a few seconds on each, and I'll run a few down. You'll get the idea of what I'm talking about, and then we'll come to you on the phones for the rest of the show, and just give me one or two. And obviously, we're not going to be able to play the clips on everything from you guys because Joel won't have time to source that, and maybe we'll play some going into breaks or whatever. But I wanted to get it warmed up with some that I picked that, again, just came to me on first thought. And I agree fully with the guy who called in last night about Cry of Love. So here's a little bit of a song called Highway Jones, the opening track on that record from the album. The album is called Brother. Joel, hit this, please. Hold on, because I'm getting the CD. All right, I'm back. But man, to fade down that Audley Freed guitar play, his guitar playing is insane. The tone is insane. It's so great. So that record was I got the glorious CD right in my hands, 1993. And unfortunately, I found out that the singer on that record, who has a phenomenal voice, has since passed away. His name escapes me at the moment. I'm looking at it on the liner notes, but I'm trying to see it. Here we go. I couldn't find the CD till just now, but hold on. Okay, the band was Robert Kearns on bass, Jason Patterson on drums, Kelly Holland is the singer, Audley Freed is the guitar player. Kelly Holland, the singer on that album, I found out has sadly passed away. What an amazing record. Interesting note on that record, there was a second record and the singer had left. And the singer on the second record is none other than Robert Mason, who now currently sings in Warrant. But it's a great, great record. I love Robert, and the second record's real good, but that first record is a masterpiece. Brother from Cry of Love, like a southern bluesy hard rock, just killer vocals, and super live, like in the studio sounding record. A band that I loved, who I found out just played the Whiskey in LA last weekend. I would have loved to have seen them if I was in town at that time. But this is a band that came out late 80s, debut album on Island Records, and a band that was super glammy looking, but had dual guitars and had a real rawness to them. You know, a lot of glam bands have a very polished, produced sound, right? Very commercial, big stacked choruses, all of that. This band had a total glam look, but had great dueling guitar players, but had a very almost punky, raw attitude to what they did. The band I'm talking about is called Vain, V-A-I-N. The lead singer's name, Davey Vain, and as I just mentioned, they still play every once in a while. And their debut album on Island, I remember I was working with Anthrax at the time, who were signed to Island. I used to go up to Island for meetings, and I remember the president of Island giving me advance cassette of this record and saying, "This is something you might like." And I remember listening to it and loving it, but also saying, I don't think Island Records is necessarily the right home for this. And unfortunately, nothing happened with it, but the band does still exist. The single and video from their record, the closest they came to a hit, was a song called Beat the Bullet. Here's a little bit of Vain. Man, killer record. No Respect is the name of the record. It's just, you can hear it. There's a total rawness to that record. And I just love that. It was like juxtaposed against super glam look, but total like rawness and attitude in that record. Record's phenomenal, top to bottom. No Respect by Vain is one of those records for me. I've mentioned this band a lot. A band I actually signed and did a third record with when I was at Megaforce, but the first two records, especially the second record, is absolutely considered an underground masterpiece, especially in England, where this record's been reissued like 3 times. This band continues to talk about like coming back with a new record with their original lineup, but where it stands, I don't know. The band is called Icon. They hail from the Phoenix area. First album was super heavy, like Judas Priest heavy. Second record, way more commercial, but considered to be the masterpiece. The record was produced by Ron Nevison and mixed by Eddie Kramer, or vice versa, but they had major production at the time. Capitol Records. This would have been around 85, 86. Icon, the album Night of the Crime, and some unbelievable melodic hard rock here. This song is called Missing. I'm hearing this stuff and I just want to hear these whole records right now. What a friggin' tease this is, because these are, this stuff is brilliant. These are my, what do I call this? Undiscovered Gems? Yeah. That's what I'm going with today. All right, I'm going to move through mine quickly because again, I'm going to give you guys one or two, but I just indulged myself here once I got into this, as you could hear, to share some with you. I just mentioned this guy a second ago, Mark Tornillo, the lead singer who's currently been in Accept for like 12, 13 years. Before Accept, I told you he was a friend of mine for like 40 years and a Jersey guy. I've known him forever. He had a band called TT Quick. TT Quick started on the New Jersey club scene in the 70s and then into the early 80s, predominantly as an AC/DC tribute. And then in the early and mid 80s, started making original music, including an EP that came out first and then a full-length debut on Megaforce Island Records called Medal of Honor. And that record is phenomenal. And the guitar player in TT Quick, phenomenal. His name is Dave DiPietro, a big influence on other guys from Jersey like Scotty and Snake from Skid Row, like Zach Wilde will tell you the impact that Dave DiPietro had on him. It's one of those classic cases of a band being very influential and influencing guys that went on to have way greater household name success, but they would go and watch TT Quick and learn from Dave. And of course, Mark Tornillo, the singer in TT Quick, who is now, as I mentioned, in Accept. This is the riff and the groove in this song, so killer. From Medal of Honor, TT Quick, Child of Sin. Oh, God. Oh, you could hear that guitar solo that's about to come in. Oh, Joel, you're killing me. Killing me. A couple more. Pete Way left UFO and formed a band called Wasted. Wasted. He was supposed to be the Way in Fast Way, but due to contractual issues, bailed on that band and instead formed Wasted. Debut album is called Vices. This is one of the greatest, sleaziest, dirty, live feeling rock records. Oh, I listened to it like it just came out. It's 40 years old. And the drum sound on this record on this particular song is enormous. It rivals Creatures of the Night drum sound. It's massive. But the whole record, top to bottom, is just this great, I don't have any other word to, like, sleazy, dirty, hard rock record. It's so good. So this is came out on Chrysalis Records, I'd say back around 83-ish. They opened for Ozzy and Motley Crue on the tour for this record. And again, the album is called Vices, the debut from the band Wasted, and the track is called Love Loaded. Oh, greatness. Greatness. These are some of my favorite records ever made, and most people don't know them. That's the whole point of doing this. A few more quick ones, then we're going to get to you on the phones. I don't know how many times I've told people over the last 20 years. I've probably preached the gospel of this guy on the radio and more and on TV for that matter, more than any artist. And you know him best now as the frontman, singer, guitarist of the Winery Dogs, but he has an insane catalog of solo music that would blow your mind, probably like 20-something records. And the all-time masterpiece in the solo career of Richie Kotzen is a record called Into the Black, in my humble opinion. It's a record he released independently. It was a record that I first heard when it came out, and it blew my mind because I didn't even know he could sing at that time. And then I found out he played every instrument, wrote every song, and sang everything on the record. And, of course, he's been a friend, and I've been a massive fan now for literally about 20 years since I first heard this record. It is an absolute masterpiece of a record. Again, the record is called Into the Black. The artist is Richie Kotzen. Here's a little bit of a track I picked called Doing What the Devil Says to Do.
I don't wanna be hurting.
it's just it's just beyond brilliant. The whole record is brilliant. It's and if you've seen Richie live, he does that song a lot live, but that whole record top to bottom is a masterpiece. Into the Black is the name of the record. People ask me all the time, because a lot of people got turned on to Richie through the Winery Dogs, and they're like, hey, where do I start? Because he's got a huge solo catalog. And I always pick the 3 records that actually came out all in a row: Into the Black, Go Faster, Peace Sign. To me, those are the 3. There's a ton of other great stuff, but those 3 records in a row, flawless run of records. Into the Black being my favorite. What do I got? I got 3 more quick ones. Joe Perry, when he left Aerosmith. Aerosmith does Rockin' a Hard Place, great record. Joe Perry does the Joe Perry Project, great record. Talk about loose, raw, live, dirty, nasty hard rock. Oh, the debut from the Joe Perry Project is to this day a go-to record for me. The album was called Let the Music Do the Talking, which of course would also, the title track from this record, when Joe rejoined Aerosmith, Aerosmith re-recorded, and Steven Tyler rewrote the lyrics to. It's on Done with Mirrors. But the Joe Perry Project, I think this is around 1980. This song is called Conflict of Interest. Oh, God, it's so great. I just want to just shut it down and crack open a beer and crank that sucker right now. Conflict of Interest. Again, all these records, I'm just picking a song to give you a taste. All these records, the reason why I'm highlighting them, top to bottom, great. By the way, I'm realizing I could have easily done Whitford St. Holmes as far as Aerosmith offshoots. That's a great record too, but Conflict of Interest, Joe on vocals. He doesn't sing on the whole record. You know, he's the Keith Richards of Aerosmith, basically, as you can hear there. But there's another singer on the record named Ralph Morman, who also is great. But the stuff with Joe, it's just so like you listen to that record and it sounds like you're in a rehearsal studio, warts and all, listening to that band play, and it's so brilliant because it's so real and loose and live and raw and great. This is a band that came out. I think the problem with this band was we talk about those groups early 90s that released their debut record, and then, of course, the gate came crashing down, the gate being grunge, when all these bands were wiped off the planet. If this band would have hit with this record maybe 2 or 3 years earlier, we could have been talking about a band that is and was a household name. But unfortunately, even though they had a major producer in Richie Zito, they had a major label in Geffen, they had major management, which I briefly worked for. They had everything going, but it didn't connect and didn't happen. Band from New York called Taiketo. They still play from time to time. They've been on the Monsters of Rock cruise here and there, but they released an album called Don't Come Easy. If you like commercial, big sounding, 80s sounding hard rock, this record top to bottom is phenomenal. This was the single and video from the record, Forever Young. Danny Vaughan, the lead singer, who, interestingly, I played Wasted earlier. Danny ended up replacing the guy you heard on that Wasted song on the next record and became the singer in Wasted. He was actually not, but that all took place prior to Taiketo. And then later formed that band Taiketo, which that record's around 90, 91, I think. And again, didn't stand a chance on a second record because by the time it came around, we know what happened, and the Nirvanas came in and thank you, goodbye for anything that remotely looked or sounded like that. But that is a really, really solid record. And lastly, couldn't let this go without throwing these guys in. It's a band I've mentioned a lot. It's a band that unfortunately so few people have never even heard of this band. They hail from Toronto. We've had their bass player, Andy Curran, on the show in the past. Andy is currently working in this solo band that Alex Lifeson is doing. Band released 3 albums on Polygram. They opened for Iron Maiden, came out in the early 80s. Phenomenal melodic hard rock. Their debut album was produced by Kim Mitchell, and the band I'm talking about is called Coney Hatch. From the self-titled debut, The Little Bit of Devil's Deck, Joel. That would be Steve Shelsky on guitar, who is no longer in the band, but Carl Dixon, the singer on that track, phenomenal voice, who's also sang with some other bands. And Coney Hatch actually reunited and did a show during the pandemic from the legendary El Macombo in Toronto that was also put out as a live stream and a live record. But a great melodic hard rock band that, for whatever reason, did not get over the hump at a time where they really should have in the early into the mid 80s. So there's just a few from me. Vane, Icon, Riot, TT Quick, Cry of Love, Wasted, Richie Kotzen, Joe Perry, Taiketo, Coney Hatch. Again, you can look at a lot of that and say those all could qualify as bands that should have been huge, and I get it, but obviously a lot of these guys are still active. Richie's now doing Winery Dogs and his solo stuff. Obviously, you know, Joe Perry is. So not exclusive to that, but it's more about the records. And you could totally have a case where it's a well-known band, but an off-the-radar record. So you get the idea. I want to hear from you. Give me 1 or 2, and we'll get to you right after we take a break. So let's go to a break right now.